Welcome to the Selfie Reflections podcast. I'm Usha Raman. On this episode, we're looking at how objects, like books, are used to signal identity. Joining me on this episode is researcher Anuja Premika, along with book blogger Kajree Gautam and artist and academic Delwyn Remedios. I'm Usha Raman. I'm a professor of media studies at the University of Hyderabad. And one of the things I'm interested in studying is digital culture, specifically how people present themselves and experience their own identities on various social media platforms.
And I'm Anuja Premika. I'm a PhD student at the Department of Communication at the University of Hyderabad. I'm also very interested in studying digital culture, specifically how people present themselves on Instagram through the visuals that they post on there.
So, just to give people a little bit of background, we came into this study with a curiosity that was developed in collaboration, I'd say. Because my original idea was, okay, why is it that people don't post pictures of themselves? How do objects stand in for the self? How do objects speak for the self? And to do this, what we decided to look at was two specific communities on Instagram. One was Inktober and the other was Bookstagram.
So I'm Kajree Gautam and I am from Northeast. I'm from a city called Guwahati, which is in the northeast of India. I am currently on my third year. I'm pursuing sociology honors from Indraprastha College, Delhi University. So Bookstagram happened during the month-long break that we have after our 10th board exams. So I was like, I found this account on Instagram, which was basically a picture of books. So like when after 10th, I started my Bookstagram basically with old books that I had, from my childhood days. It it also garnered a new interest in me to read more books because at one end I was, recommending my favorite books, but at the other end I was also gaining more book recommendations from other Bookstagrammers.
So essentially, it's a sub community that's tied together by nothing but a hashtag. So just by using the hashtag Bookstagram on posts that were related to books, whether they were reviews or to read lists or people just talking about their experiences with books in the past or the present, this sub community sort of forms around this hashtag, and a group of like minded people come together to talk about something that interests all of them.
So I, basically followed a lot of popular or like known Bookstagrammers that were already there and had like thousands of followers. From them, I found more of smaller Bookstagrammers who were also starting out along with me or who had started out months before. Like that, I think the whole community thing grew from like somewhat only commenting and liking to talking on DMs and then engaging through these groups. So basically, I think the groups helped a lot because say when you have this group only based with Assam Bookstagrammers, you can also talk in your own language. The language barrier gets cut down. So it's a good place to find like-minded people and connect with them, communicate and gain friendships. I think in a way, like when it's online, you do get a more diverse friendship, like more diverse, you get to meet more diverse groups of people, basically learn from them and also in a way learn from them about their experiences and how, you know, basically how their experiences have been a result or like been influenced by books or like been influenced by other circumstances.
So, throughout the Bookstagram community, although most of the people within this community are making their account mostly about books, it's still incredibly personal. Most of them write their reviews and captions in the first person. They're talking about their own experience of reading the book, and it's not strictly a review in the way you would think about it in the traditional sense.
So, posting about my creative journey, posting about my ideas or my opinions, and having the audience basically not support it exactly, but also take it in a very, positive way is also something that surprised me, because I was usually very afraid of speaking my thoughts or my opinions. But Bookstagram, posting them on Bookstagram has really helped me, overcome that. So like they are like people here are immensely support of whatever you do. Like uh, they will encourage you to post, they will encourage you to do better if you're, say, if you're having a bad day, or if you post about having a bad day. And at the same time, I will also say that people on Bookstagram can be harsh. Their judgments can be harsh, and sometimes, especially when it relates to, say, problematic authors, or like problematic book content, or like books basically, and people are not very supportive when you post about them or when you speak about them, because some people tend to say harsh things or like bash others for speaking about certain books or like certain authors. And I think like educating the person on why it is wrong or why it is harmful for them or their community as a whole is something that should be more opted for. So as such, I think these bad and good goes along hand in hand with the Bookstagram community, and it's surprising in that way.
But it's not just about the words in the books or the reviews that are being shared. It's also about a certain aesthetic, about a certain romanticized idea of reading and literature, which all features very prominently within this sub community.
So, like throughout the years, my like aesthetic of the account that I usually like to present to has changed a lot. So earlier, I used to use like a whole lot of props. Like I would find anything in the house, say like artificial flowers, uh, cup cup plate, or like a teapot or anything. Like I would find anything and I would just use it in the post because I wanted it to look more, I don't know, cluttered, more, like less of space basically. But right now I think I am more inclined towards creating a bit of minimalistic post with pictures with less clutters, less uh, props around. So basically my pictures, I use certain recurring props. So I have like a few book pages that I got from a very old book. So a few book pages. Then I have these wooden coasters that I use. Like it's a very recurring thing prop in my post. And then there's the book. So basically those are, and I also use a dried rose or two, which is like I like using dried flowers. So dried rose is like in every post, I think. So it's like that.
So there are a lot of deliberations that people go through in deciding whether they want to appear in their posts or not. Um, but that doesn't mean that the posts that don't feature them are not strongly driven by their own personal preferences or their own personal identity, the way they project it. So even when it comes to the visuals, even if they're not in the picture, like we discussed, the objects that are visible in the picture, right from the choice of book to the props and the different elements they add into their pictures or the choice of colors, it speaks to their own preferences in particular ways.
And I think in a way it creates like a self of identity for me and myself. Like when they think about now a certain book that they read because of my recommendation, they will think automatically about me and my page. Like my page will come to their mind. And I think I've also been told, like when my a certain post of my pops up on their feed, they automatically recognize that it's mine. So, like the idea that they can recognize a certain post or a picture aesthetic as being mine is something that I will say that I have been able to create that kind of identity for me through my page. So it's that way.
Just as Kajree finds a sort of identity within her Bookstagram space where she meets people, shares what she likes, posts what she recommends, there's also other communities. There are also other communities on Instagram where the posts do not display the self, but display something that stands in for the self. And one of these other communities that we studied was Inktober, where, as we will explain later, people post pictures that they draw rather than photographs of themselves or in any other personal identifiers. So, our interest was in looking at people in India who joined the Inktober challenge, which, as the name might suggest, is a month long challenge that gets people to create ink drawings, although many people also draw in pencil and other media. But they do these drawings every single day during October and they share it on Instagram and possibly on other platforms as well, but mostly on Instagram using the hashtag Inktober. One of the artists that we spoke to and that is featured in this podcast, Delwyn, for him, Inktober is very much about himself.
My name is Delwyn, and I'm a design educator at IIT Hyderabad. Although there's a lot of interconnections between these two streams, design and art, but I would consider the work that I do for myself more on the artistic side, and the work that I do for a client or for a certain purpose, keeping an audience in mind, that I would consider close to design.
So we got a chance to speak with Delwyn, who uses his Instagram art page called Shane's World by Delwyn, where he creates illustrated comic strips that document the life of his young son, Shane. And he used this as a space to share everyday experiences or things that his son found interesting through the lens of his son. And he participated in the Inktober challenge through this.
And so what happened is when I joined IIT Hyderabad, it was, I joined in the vacation time. So I didn't have a computer. All I had was, a space to sit. So at that time, my son also was about a year old and just started walking around the house, opening all sorts of drawers and cupboards and, discovering everything was a discovery for him. So my mind was always thinking about him. And since I only had A4 papers and markers, nothing else, so I just made a little drawing of that, of him opening a drawer. That was like the first one of this Shane's World series. And I had shared it on Facebook. Gradually, I started posting on both Facebook as well as Instagram. And over the years, what I have observed is that, Instagram is now getting more people. Very few people are looking at the Facebook page. Initially, it was the other way around. But I guess it's the shift in the social media trends, and now more people are, younger generations who are taking to Instagram more. I think it's more popular with them. So now, yeah, my posts are mainly on Instagram, but I also post on Facebook. The reason is because I started it from there.
So, one of the questions we were interested in exploring was why we draw what we draw. Where does the inspiration come from? It could be in part from everyday experiences or things you come across that inspire you to create art. So, that was one of the questions we went into when we spoke with Delwyn.
For me, what happens is this whole process of drawing, it takes me to that particular moment. Most of the time, the moments that I choose is something that has made me happy. I've tried to capture some joy in something small. It can be as simple as a mispronunciation. And I know he will not mispronounce for a very long time. So there's a joy in that. I don't mind not correcting him and let him talk like this. And while I'm drawing, I'm reliving that particular moment. And that feels particularly good for me because I'm reliving mostly in that happy moment. So I enjoy the process. And I also enjoy drawing. It's for me, this works.
I guess the story is a little different with Inktober, though, because you rarely see an artist post an image of themselves along with the post. So, how do we think about self-presentation in that space then?
Right. I think it's a little more complicated in Inktober because, in a way, what they're presenting is the output of the self, right? I mean, they see themselves as artists, and what they're saying is, this is the kind of artist I am.
It is definitely his life through my eyes. So I would put it as my perspective. It's a little tricky because, again, I do not know if I'm doing it particularly for him or for myself. It's both. Because I cannot deny that I get joy in this. And if it's something valuable for him later, I hope he will appreciate it.
And even though he doesn't post photographs, he does post sketches of both himself and his family. And in a way, it's even more telling than a photograph, right? Because when you draw yourself, you're drawing yourself as you see yourself and the features of your life that you want to show. Whereas a photograph in that way is kind of flat.
And the interesting thing, definitely all storytelling mediums have their own strengths and also drawbacks. So what I understand about illustration and an artistic thought about these events is that uh, the storytelling is happening in my mind, and I remember certain details, and some details are not important. Like maybe the if he's playing on the bed, maybe the bed sheet is not as important. What design is or pattern is there on the bed sheet might not be as important, but what he's doing is more important. So interestingly, there are certain choices being made. Let's compare it with a photograph, which will capture everything, and here the artistic choices deciding what to put in the illustration, what is necessary. Now there are multiple approaches to illustration. There are some which are realistic, there's some caricature, semi-realistic, a number of ways to talk about illustration. I'm looking at the ones that I particularly do. And so the story or the essence or the emotion of that moment is something that I am trying to capture. And of course, I'm learning. By each drawing I do, I'm learning one. I've just become one drawing more experienced. So definitely that also improves my skill and improves my storytelling ability as well. But my perspective will reflect on things that I want to highlight. And I cannot answer how he will react to this when he grows up. But there's no denying that it's my perspective of his childhood. It's as it is. With sometimes I have imagination, sometimes I see things very realistically. So whatever comes in my mind, I welcome that, and I put it down.
So clearly, there's an aspect of others who are sharing this space with you, a sort of community. And the sense of community we did see in the Bookstagram space as well. And in October too, it seems to happen, as Delwyn explains, that some of these connections that happen on Instagram don't just stay within Instagram, they also spill over into the offline world where communities are extended or actually formed because of what was spoken or what was seen on Instagram.
So in one of the papers we had written, I think which I had spoken to both of you about in this in conference hosted by IIT Delhi. So there we mentioned that uh, social media definitely also increases literacy, because people are have ease of access to this, and now they get to know things through, although there's you can't control the content, but people get to read and people get to look at visuals. They get educated from both aspects, visuals as well as words. And so over there, we also in that paper we also mentioned that every medium has its own potential, and social media, unlike a newspaper, you can directly interact with the audience almost real time. So there were some episodes where I had teasers, and my son Shane was mispronouncing, so he said words like um, what was it, nano, and I asked people to guess what is he saying. So the illustration was, incomplete. And then in the next day, I drew a rhinoceros. So nano meant rhino. So I had like these incomplete drawings where the animal was not drawn and just him interacting with the animal, and like as a teaser, a wonderful possibility of interaction.
So, in academia, there are a number of scholars who talk about how we all perform ourselves in particular ways, especially online. So, in these two communities specifically that we've looked at, how do we think of how do we think about how people are performing the self in particular ways through their participation in these sub-communities or through the act of content creation itself, even when they don't heavily feature their own image or likeness in these posts that they're sharing?
So this is where we came up with the notion of the performing object, right? This is the idea that through the act of creation, through the act of participating in a particular community, according to the rules of that community, you actually perform the self, you generate the self, and then perform that self.
So I think from the creator's perspective, it's for me, it's important for my work to be me. I cannot be anybody else. And things definitely these platforms can get competitive, and there are also downsides to this. Uh, and I don't keep in mind too much about followers or anything. I'd rather have a few who appreciate the work, and the work at least will put a little smile to them rather than a lot of selfie photos. And it's wonderful that I get to make my living out of something I love. I'm fortunate. But it makes sense to me. So I don't look at competitive aspects, somebody's work is better, or, because it's my work and my stories, and that's it. That's how I am looking at it. Has meaning in my life.
So it's a different way of looking at performance of the self on social media. I think it actually extends the ideas that other scholars have talked about in terms of how we often use text to perform or use our own image to perform. And instead, what we are saying is that performance also extends to the act of creation in very specific ways, or the act of curation in very specific ways, when the output of that act is not an image of the self, but an image of an object. What we're arguing is that the object does the work of a selfie. So if the selfie is something that makes you present in the world and tells the world, this is who I am, this is where I am, in many ways, the object is doing that for you. And the object also allows you to do that in layered ways that perhaps, a photograph of yourself cannot, because it brings out some of these qualities, right? I mean, it says here, I'm an artist, or here, I'm somebody who reads. And I think that's what we found interesting. And not just in terms of how we analyzed the pictures themselves, but also in the conversations we had with these creators. They said so in so many words that it's important to them that the pictures they create using books and other paraphernalia, or what they draw, that it actually does represent aspects of themselves. Thank you for listening to the Selfie Reflections podcast, a companion to our book, Digital Expressions of the Selfie. This is the third of 4 episodes. Do check out the rest, and if you'd like to read our book, it's out now. Just search online. You can find almost all of us on Instagram. Drop us a line, or better still, send us a selfie.